I've been working for many years on the new Polin Museum, the Museum of Polish Jewish History, that's recently opened in Warsaw. And one of the purposes of that museum is to educate different groups, Poles and Jews, in the unique and interesting history of Polish Jewry, to remind Poles that they can't understand the history of their own country without understanding the role that the Jews played in it. And to remind Jews that you don't simply learn about Poland by going on March of the Living, that Poland is not just an excursion to death camps, but that there is an obligation to learn about the important part that Poland played in Jewish history. This sense of rootedness and belonging that many Jews felt towards Poland can be seen in the several legends that Jews like to tell about how the Jews got to Poland. One legend is that when the first Jews came to Poland, there were Hebrew letters emblazoned on the bark of the forests, on the bark of the trees. And those Hebrew letters said Polin, which is the word for Poland, but it means in Hebrew, here you shall rest. And that was indeed chosen as the name of the new Jewish museum in Poland. And then in a Yiddish novel by Sholem Asch called Kiddush Hashem, there's one character who recounts the legend of how when Noah released the dove from the ark, and the dove was going to fly over these enormous expanses of ocean, God put huge palm fronds on the waters so that the dove would have a place to rest. And when the Jews were hurled into Gullus, were hurled into the diaspora, the legend goes, God placed the palm frond of Poland, this huge land of Poland, as a place where the Jews could find rest and refuge. And when the Messiah came, a huge tunnel would open up and all the Jews would immediately be whisked from Poland, yeshivas, books and all, to Jerusalem. There's a very interesting legend, the Esther legend, a legend told by Jews and Poles about a young, a beautiful Jewish girl called Esther, the daughter of a poor tailor, in a gorgeous town called Casimir, a town on the Vistula River. The town still exists. And if you've seen Yiddish films made in the 1930s, like Yidel mitten Fiddle or The Dybbuk, those films were filmed on location in Casimir. And Casimir was where the great Polish king Casimir the Great had his castle. Casimir the Great ruled in the middle of the 14th century. And the legend has it that Casimir the Great fell in love with this Jewish girl, Esther. He was smitten. He built a secret tunnel so Esther and he could meet. Esther bore him children. And because of Esther, the legend goes, Casimir the Great issued this famous charter of promises, promising the Jews protection and toleration. The parallels, of course, to the Purim story, to the story of the Megillah, are very, very obvious. We don't know to what degree there's a smidgen of truth in the legend, but it's interesting that there's a Polish version of the legend where Esther turns into Esterka, And instead of being this lovely Queen Esther type who intercedes on behalf of the Jewish people, she turns into a wily, cunning Żydówka, into a wily, cunning Jewess who takes this trusting, good-hearted, but naive Christian Polish king, and at the behest of the Jews, winds him around her little finger so that he will sell out Poland lock, stock, and barrel to the Jews. The ties that Jews felt to the Polish landscape are expressed in many Yiddish poems. One such poem by a little-known poet named Aryeh Shemri, who wrote this poem in what was then called Palestine, 1942, he still missed the Polish landscape. And the refrain of this poem is, Baweisel bulgunaref, ashacheris in die Rosses, a minche und a meiref in klingen von die Kosses, which means on the banks of the Vistula, the Bug, and the Narev, you can see the words of the Shacharis, the morning prayer in the morning dew. And in the afternoon, as you hear the sighs cutting down the grain, you can hear the words of the Mincha prayer, of the afternoon prayer. The Ramo, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, the great 16th century rabbi in Krakow, said, better to live in Poland with a dry crust of bread than to live anywhere else.